So we'll start again for session 2. Hopefully you've all had a chance to grab a cup of tea, coffee, custard cream, and ready to go on to the second part of today's session. So delighted to welcome a long-time friend, Steve Cunningham. So I worked with Steve back when I was wearing the Iris t-shirt, which was many, many years ago, and we used Steve.
It's a bit ironic for a blind man and me working with Iris, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. You're not the first one to have said that, but there we go. You did a very good job for us, and we used you for a couple of years, and it was all very successful. So obviously kept in touch with Steve via social media. So he just seemed a perfect fit for today's session. So Steve is a motivational speaker. He went blind at the age, it was around about 12, wasn't it, Steve, when you were quite young?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And anyway, anyway, so without further ado, I will pass it over to Steve and Qantas, who is his beloved blind dog. So Steve, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, wherever you are in the world. As Dermot said, Dermot and I have known each other for probably 20 years, I thought. I think it's probably the longest relationship I've had in my life, but that's another story altogether. This is Qantas, as you can see. He's my guide dog. He's a German Shepherd cross Golden Retriever. He's 4 years old, and he's probably the most incredible dog I've ever had, from a mobility and independence point of view, but also as a companion. You couldn't wish to get a more loyal, kind, devoted animal as what he is. Steve, the other guy wandering around, he works for Blind Vision. He helps do all the business development side of things. So he's been working on doing all the IT and does all the admin, drives me around to events, takes me to golf, but he's not as good as I am, but I'm bound to say that anyway. So, you know, Blind Vision has been running for many, many years, as I'll go through with you all throughout this keynote. But I think before we start today, on reflection of what's happened over the last couple of weeks, when we talk about mindset and quality, leadership, you know, devotion, resilience, all these things that our amazing Queen has delivered and enhanced our life and enriched our lives for the last 70 years, I don't think it can actually be understated. So when we talk about Great Britain, I think she's well and truly, along with everything that's gone on over the last few weeks, has put the great back in Britain. And it just shows that, you know, success is not about size. Success, I always believe, is in your heart. And I always say to people that credits in your heart gives you the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives, regardless of whatever their creed or background is. I mean, Brian touched on it a little while ago about money. You know, what is value? Is value based on money? Is benefit based on money? I don't think it is. So I think if you've got the foundations and the belief and that dream as to what it looks like for you, yeah, you know, it is a challenge climbing a mountain. We know that. It is a challenge for me walking to the bus stop with Qantas. But these challenges are won and lost in your head, and it's how you position those in your mind.
Hello. I don't know if you can hear us, Steve, but you're currently frozen. It's never going to be a session that would go 100% to plan. So, Steve, you are.
I think the issue is at Steve's end.
Must be if we can all speak to one another.
Yeah. So hopefully you can reconnect.
I'll just.
Yeah, he's dropped out now, so hopefully they can reconnect. One of the reasons, sorry, I was just say one of the reasons why we wanted to get Stephen as the keynote speaker is because it's very easy for us all to make excuses when it comes to why we don't do what we do, and we wanted to make sure that we put speakers in front of you all where we couldn't make those excuses, where we couldn't say, oh, it's easy for them, it's different for them, and as you will already have seen, it's certainly not easy for Steve, and so we want him to talk through what can be achieved if you recognize that you can overcome your own barriers as much as anything else. He's just rejoining us now, which is good.
Great stuff. Okay. Hi, Steve. Are you with us? There he is. You're back with us, Steve.
Oh, I just went off for a second then. You're back on again.
Where did we get to?
You can continue where you were, just maybe put your clip on.
You were just talking about even walking to the bus stop can be a challenge for you. That was when you
I mean, walking to the bus stop is a challenge for me, obviously, but we all face these challenges in life, and I always believe that it's about how we deal with situations, whether we've got that mindset to be strong, to be resilient, and to be successful. There has to be an element that you have to be selfish and govern yourself into how you move forward. But if you haven't got that goal and that dream, then that journey's not going to come to fruition for you. And my life, losing my sight in a short period of time, like I did, it's enabled me to be me. It's enabled me to do the things that I've done in my life. It hasn't disabled me, because I'm a great believer that the only thing that disables you from success or achievement in your life is not whether you can't see, hear, walk, or talk. It's attitude. And attitude is key to whatever we do with our lives. You can be the best footballer in the world, but if you've got the wrong attitude and you surround yourself with the wrong people, then you're not going to fulfill that ability. And the journey that I'm going to take you on this morning is probably a journey that you'll never will be on, and you'll never forget it again. And Dermot, you've been on this journey with me, so you're aware of what's going to come this morning. But all I would ask you to do is think about where you are with your lives. What is it that you want to achieve in your lives? Are you satisfied with who you are and what you're doing? And I think you have to be brutal sometimes, and you have to answer these questions head on, because if you don't answer these questions head on, you don't take that ownership and responsibility, you're not going to develop as a person, and you're not going to take anybody else on that journey that you want to go on. And I think this journey that I've gone on, yes, it's different, but sometimes I have to pinch myself when I look at where I am today to where I was at the age of 12 and losing my eyesight. But before I start my keynote to you this morning, can I ask you all to close your eyes for a moment for me? And can you try and imagine what it is that I'm going to share with you over the next 30 seconds? Can you imagine what it must be like to be able to drive a sports car at 200 miles an hour and not be able to see? Can you imagine what it must be like to be on the English Channel in a powerboat reaching land speeds of 230 miles an hour and not be able to see? Fly an aeroplane around the United Kingdom on some speaking software, captain your country at European and World Football Championships, play for handicap of golf at a ridiculous fee, and be the proudest father of my two adorable daughters, Megan and Katie, who I've never seen and never will see. Now, these are just a few of the things I've achieved in my life since losing my eyesight. You can open your eyes and I'll explain to you how I did it. I remember day one, walking to school with my mum, being able to see the cars, the lorries, the vans and the buses going down the street. I sat in class, being able to see the blackboard, being able to see the books, but more importantly, I could see my mum waiting outside the school gates after school. I moved on to junior school, was still no indication as to how my life was going to change. And at the age of 8, I got selected to play for the finest football club in the world. And it's not Sunderland, obviously. It's Aston Villa. So what an amazing start to a young boy's life. I've got these dreams and ambitions going on as to how my life was going to be. I anticipated being on Match of the Day every Saturday evening, in the Sunday newspapers, having a great home, great holidays, no money worries, play for my club and country. But things like that generally only happen in an ideal world. And as we're aware, we don't actually live in an ideal world. We live in this world. And in this world, things change, and they change when you least expect them to. And that started happening to me 6 months later. Sitting in class, not been able to see the blackboard very well, not been able to see my books very well, and by now, I definitely couldn't see my mum waiting outside the gates after school. I tried to explain to the teachers in class the problems that I was facing at that time, but you know, that was the 70s, and in the 70s, it's a lot different then to what it is now. And all I was told was that I was trying to get out of doing homework, coming into lessons, and they put me in a class for slow learners. So all of a sudden, they'd labelled me as being different. I tried to explain to my mum, also I was reading a book at home one evening, that I couldn't see what was actually on the page, and all I could see was a mass of dots. So the following morning, she took me up to see the ophthalmologist at the local hospital in town. Under diagnosis, he could see that there was something not quite right with the retinas in both of my eyes. So an ambulance was called and we were rushed off to Birmingham Eye Hospital. I was in hospital for 10 weeks. Whilst I was in hospital, I was diagnosed as having retinal detachment, glaucoma, and cataracts. They told me that they thought at some point in my life I may go blind, but they couldn't give me any indication as to when that would be, whether it be a year, 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. I was on steroid injections twice a day. I was on painkillers and eye drops every 4 hours. I now went back to school with a pair of National Health spectacles on. So yet again, I was now different. I was different as well due to the steroid injections, and I was 2 stone heavier than I was before I went into hospital. So now I wasn't the up and coming footballer that everybody wanted to be with. I was now different. I was now the fat kid. I was now 4 eyes. I was now the blind bat, the blind this, and the blind that. As a result of that treatment, I started playing truant from school. Social services were called into school along with my parents, and the recommendation was that I should go off to special school for blind children 100 miles from where we used to live. So what a 9 months I had. 1 minute I thought I was going to be a footballer. Then I was rushed off to hospital to be told I could go blind at any time. And now I've been put in school for blind children 100 miles from mum and dad, knowing that this might be the last babe I ever see. And if that did happen to me, clearly the only people who want around me would be my parents, but that wasn't going to happen for me. The advantage I had at that point in my life was that I still got a considerable amount of eyesight compared to a lot of the kids at school who were congenitally blind. So in the mornings, I used to make sure they got the right colour jackets and trousers on, jumpers and shoes. I used to read their mail to them and generally help them around school wherever it was they needed to get to, whether that was to classroom, to the dining room, to the gym. Because I got the most sight at that point, I became the captain of the school football team, the captain of the cricket team, and I always made sure that I got the best seat in front of the TV after school. I've been at school for approximately 3 years, and the school itself was at the foot of the Malvern Hills in Worcestershire. And over the Malvern Hills, there was always this mist. And I walked into class this one morning, and my teacher said to me, "Are you okay today, Steve?" I said, "Well, funny enough, I'm not. I've got a real bad headache." She said, "You look really pale." She said, "How long have you had a bad headache for then?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, 2 or 3 days." I said, "I think it might have something to do with this weather." She said, "The weather? Why the weather?" I said, "Well, all I can see today is this heavy mist coming down at the start of fog." She said, "Well, that's a little bit worrying, especially today, because it's a nice bright day outside with high cloud and the sun shines out." So she took my hand and took me up to surgery. My mum and dad were called into school. We were all rushed off to Birmingham Eye Hospital, and 16 weeks later, I was totally blind. And people always say to me, how do you cope with something like that, Steve? Well, at the age of 12, you don't. How did my mum and dad and brothers and sisters cope with it? They didn't. I used to lie in bed at night, crying myself to sleep, thinking, why me, God? What have I done to deserve this? I was lonely, I was frightened, I was confused. But the biggest thing that's going through my mind was, will people still love me how they used to love me when I could see? So I went back to school to Voices Without Faces, and that's been my life since 1974. So I wasn't the captain of the school football team anymore, or the cricket team, and I definitely didn't need the best seat in front of TV after school. So to show you lovely people this morning that was the toughest 2 years of my life would be a bit of an understatement. But in a situation like that, you're always waiting for a break or a change to happen in your life. And that was about to happen to me Christmas morning when the phone rang and my mum said, your Uncle Graham's on the phone, Steve. I said, what does he want? She said, I don't know, you better come and speak to him. So he said to me, what are you doing in the morning? I says, playing my Christmas presents, probably. Why? He said, would you like to go and see Villa train? I said, yeah, I'd love to. He said, well, I'll come pick you up at 9:30. So I come off the phone and Mum said to me, what does he want then? I said, he wants to take me off see Villa train in the morning. She said, that's interesting. I said, what is? She said, do you remember that article that I read to you this week out the newspaper about Villa signing a goalkeeper from Blackpool called John Burridge? I said, yeah. She said, well, your Uncle Graham is a Blackpool supporter. The only reason he wants to take you up there is so he could meet one of his old players. But as he said he would, he came down and he picked me up and we went off to training. I remember standing behind the goal this one morning that John Burridge was in. I could hear the ball bounced off the crossbar and off the post and off Budgie. But after training, he came over to me and he said to me, so Steve, why is it you're not playing football anymore? I said, well, it's obvious why I'm not playing football anymore. I can't see. He said, you don't need to be able to see to play football. He said, we need to do something about it. So one day after I came home from school holidays, Budgie came down and picked me up from home and we went off to the training. And what we did was he bought me a plastic football and he took the valve out of this plastic football so it went flat. He then put some rice, peas, stones and little ball bearings inside this ball, put the valve back in the ball and blew it up. So now I've got a ball that was audible. It sounded a bit like a baby's rattle. But obviously I haven't kicked a ball for 2 years. So if I'm being honest, I never thought I was going to kick a ball again. So to start with, John used to hold my hand and he'd run across the pitch with me and then he'd run back across the pitch with me. And then he'd go stand 10 yards away, 20 yards away, 30 yards away until I got a confidence that I could run freely and I wasn't going to come to any danger. So now I'm actually doing something I never thought I'd do again, and that was playing football. But not only did he teach me to play football again, he then took me swimming, he taught me how to ride a bike again. So when we talk about influential people and inspirational people in your life, Budgie and Villa, they were that vehicle at that time in my life. So I was working my little socks off and working hard not to let him down and the club down, not understanding the development that was actually taking place in my life at the same time. So the year after all that happened, I went to set a 100 meters world record for a junior in a time of 12.2 seconds. So now school considered development was happening, and so could I. The school I was at, Licky Grange School for the Blind in Worcestershire, it was as tough as it was starting there, it was the right place for me to be in. They taught me how to use a white stick, so I've got mobility. They taught me how to read and write Braille, so I could communicate. And then they taught me how to look after myself. So I remember walking into domestic sciences one morning, and my teacher said to me, I've got a real treat for you today, Steve. I said, what is it? She said, I'm going to teach you how to make a chili con carne. I said, that could be interesting. She said, well, as long as you do as you're told, there won't be a problem. I said, that might be the problem. However, I remember standing there, chopping my mushrooms up and my onions. I got my mince in the pan, threw it all together, put my tomatoes in as well and my baked beans. And my mate said to me, don't forget your sachet of chili powder. I said, how much of that you put in? And he said, put as much as you want in. And believe you me, When people tell you that glass eyes don't cry, I'm telling you an absolute load of rubbish. I moved on from cooking. They then taught me how to wine, and it's probably taken 25 years to get feeling back in my fingers after that little exercise. So I got all the social skills that I needed to be an independent person when I finished off at school. What I hadn't got, or they thought I hadn't got, was the academic ability to go to Royal National College for the Blind. That was my ambition, but the school told me the only thing that they thought I was fit for doing was making baskets, tuning pianos, fixing bikes, and they told me if that didn't work out for me, I could always sell boxes of matches on a street corner. Well, I've never sold a box of matches on a street corner, and I've never made a basket. My parents came into school and put pressure on the careers advice that we've been given. I went off to the assessment at Royal National College for the Blind, and I started there in August 1980. Whilst I was at college, I became the captain of the college football team. And the 3 years that I was a captain, we won the league and we won all the cup competitions that we entered into. Our greatest rivals, well, they thought they were anyway, was a team from Manchester called Northern Sports. And we turned up at this tournament this one morning in Manchester, only to find that the Manchester team had brought their own eye doctor along to test my eyesight because they thought I could see. And at half time, we were playing them in the final, and it was 0-0. And their captain came over to me and he said, "Steve, if you don't wear a blindfold in the second half, we're not going to play you." So I put this blindfold on and I went out and scored a second half hat trick. So I think it proves that if you've got an ability and a confidence in yourself and in your team, it really doesn't matter what obstructions are thrown at you. It only motivates you even more. So I finished off at Royal National College for the Blind, and I started working for the Child Advisory and Psychological Service for the Birmingham Education Department as a secretary. It wasn't something I really wanted to do, but I thought, well, it's my first job, it's a good start for me, so that's what I did. The difficulty I had with the job was that at that point in my life, I hadn't got a guide dog like I have with Qantas. I'd only got my white stick. So every morning, I used to leave mum's, tap my way to the railway station, get on the train to Birmingham New Streets, get off at Birmingham New Streets and tap my way up to the office. So I've been doing this every morning and every night for 18 months. And now my life had changed beyond any recognition whatsoever, in that I've got my first guide dog. She was a German Shepherd cross Golden Retriever, and she was called Brandy. So now in the morning when I'm leaving mum's, I'm flying up to the station, I'm jumping on and off these trains, I'm flying up to the office. Life was so much easier. But the biggest thing I noticed was that people now started talking to me. Now, these was for the same people that I've travelled with every morning and every night for 18 months who hadn't said boo to me. And now they're saying, "What's your dog called? How long have you had her? What difference does she make in your life?" But I'd have been a bit worried if they'd have come up to me and said to me, "Excuse me, mister, what's your white stick called?" My point is, when you have an animal like this, the people's perceptions towards you having a disability are so far removed than that when you've got a stick. No, they're not going to come up and talk to you when you've got a stick because they haven't got anything to break that barrier down with. But as Steve will tell you, and Deb, if she was here, when you've got a dog, everybody wants to talk to you, everybody wants them to know about your life and what the dog brings to your life, and which is a bit ironic because when you've actually got a stick, you need more help than you ever do with a dog. So I finished off working for the Child Advisory and Psychological Service, and I moved to Banbury in Oxfordshire, and I started working for Barclays Bank. I started as a blind telephonist answering the switchboard. The difficulty I had with that job was boredom, because people that know me will tell you that, you know, to get Steve Cunningham to sit still for 5 minutes that's a miracle in itself. To try and get me to sit still for 8 hours, it just doesn't happen. So after about 2 or 3 years doing this job, I got a little bit bored. So I went off to see my office manager, Andy Rogers. He said, "Morning, Steve." I said, "Morning." He said, "You all right?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "What do you mean, no?" He said, "Why?" I said, "I'm bored." He said, "What do you mean bored? How can you be bored?" I said, "Well, wouldn't you be bored of saying good morning, Barclays Bank, or good afternoon, Barclays Bank, for the last 3 or 4 years?" He said, "If I'm being honest, I probably would." He said, "What can we do about it?" I said, "How about if we get some speaking software and put it onto the computer system at the bank?" He said, and what difference will that make? So when a customer phones me up, I can take their account number, put it into the system, and then it'll tell me by speech what their balance is, what direct debits or standing orders have gone through, or what check payments have gone through. So do you think it would work? I said, let's try it. And it did work. The difficulty I had, though, I was now blocking the customer's phone in the bank up because I was dealing with all these inquiries. So he moved me off the switchboard into customer services. Yet again, after a couple of years, I got bored with customer services. And my real ambition at the bank was that I wanted to be a mortgage specialist. However, the head of the mortgage department was a guy that really didn't take to me. I think he thought that I should be grateful and thankful that the bank had actually employed somebody with a disability. So whilst he was on holiday, the branch manager came down and said to me, how are you getting on with your job? Are you enjoying it? I told him what I really wanted to do. He said, well, if that's what you want to do, Steve, I'm moving into mortgages. So when this guy came back off holiday to find me in his mortgage department, as you can probably appreciate, it caused a few fireworks, to say the least. He was then saying, making things up about my conduct and my sexual innuendos to the girls that I was working with. It's an absolute load of rubbish, all of it. So I did eventually end up heading the mortgage department at the bank, which was, a fantastic ambition personally for myself. Whilst I was there, I got married. And when we talk about things changing and happening in your life, that was about to happen to me. The 90s were a fantastic time of my life. In 93, I got married. In 1994, I captained the England blind football team in the first European Football Championships in Barcelona. So to represent your country, it is a truly fantastic honour. The following year, our first daughter was born, Megan, and then 4 years later, Katie Louise was born. So when we talk about changing periods in a person's life, to go from a man to becoming a dad, there's a huge, huge difference. Prior to all of that happening, though, I was selected to play and represent Great Britain in the Great Britain European athletics tournaments at Crystal Palace and over in Zurich. But as I say, these are things that, you're always going to be part of your life. And that crossroads of my life that I'm mentioning at the moment was definitely the 90s. As I say, 94 was great. The girls were born in 95 and 99. But for me, the ultimate was when I captained the England blind football team in the World Cup finals in Sao Paulo in 1998. So to represent your country is a true fantastic honour. To stand there with the national anthem playing, and you've got 4,000 screaming South Americans at you, you don't need any more motivation than that. It was shortly after I came back from Sao Paulo in 1998, and I was sat in our local pub this one evening having a drink. And this guy walked in and he said, Steve, I'm glad I've seen you. I said, why is that then, Kevin? He said, I've just seen a blind man on TV set a world blind land speed record. I said, what was he driving? He said he was driving a Ford Cosworth and he did 132 miles an hour. But the guy I was having a drink with was a friend of mine called Pete Gwynn, and Pete was a national rally driving instructor. And Pete said to me, we could do something like that, Steve, if you wanted to. I said, well, if we're going to do that, I'd like to do it in aid of guide dogs for the blind for obvious reasons. And I'd like to do it in an XJ220 Jaguar. He said, I bet you would. So I wrote to Jaguar in Coventry, and they agreed to meet us at Bruntingthorpe in Leicestershire. And what they did, they brought two Jaguars along. They brought an XJR and an XJ220. And what I had to do was prove to them that I could drive this XJR sufficiently well before they let me loose in this XJ220. So we've been doing some testing for about half an hour. And there's these three guys from Central TV there. And they said to me, oh, Steve, do you mind if we get in the back of the car with you and do some filming? I said, yeah, of course you can. So there's me behind the wheel, there's Pete next to me, and you've got these three guys in the back of this car, pranking around like kids in a sweet shop. So anyway, they got all their audio equipment, all the cameras. Off we went down the track. They were pranking around in the back of the car. Well, they were pranking around at 60 miles an hour, and 100 miles an hour is a bit quieter. 120 miles an hour is considerably quieter, and 165 miles an hour, I thought they'd all passed out. So I brought this car to a standstill, and these guys fired out the back of this Jag like champagne corks coming out of bottles on a Christmas morning. And I said to Pete, I thought they wanted to do some interviews. He said, you're going to have to give them a minute. I said, why? He said, one of them's green, one of them's white, and there's another chap over there being sick under a bush. Anyway, they came back and started these interviews. And this guy said to me, he said, I must be absolutely barking mad. I said, why? He said, what do you mean, why? I've just been driven by a blind man at 165 miles an hour. That's why. I said, how was it for you? He said, I don't know, I had my eyes shut. I said, well, I think I felt when I was driving the car. But unfortunately, Jaguar withdrew their car sponsorship, because what we wanted to do was take their car around the UK on a roadshow promoting visually impaired and guide dogs for the blind. So then I wrote to Chrysler in Dover, and Chrysler came up with the V10 Dodge Viper. But not only did they come up with the Viper, they came up with Justin Bell. And Justin Bell was the world record holder in that class of car at that time. So Justin taught myself to drive the Viper, and he taught Pete to drive the Viper. Justin's time over a measured mile was 23.8 seconds, and mine was 24.2 seconds. And the only reason he was slightly quicker than me was because he could keep the car straighter than I could. That project generated £5.5 million worth of media coverage. The maximum speed that I did in the wets was 176.3 miles an hour, and Guide Dogs for the Blind had a donation of £30,000. Barclays Bank were my employees at that time, but when I went back to work, there's a brown envelope on my desk and they've made me redundant. So many people would see that situation as negative. I saw it as a positive situation because I just had a fantastic 12 months fulfilling a dream, raising money for guide dogs, and now I'd spotted an opportunity to do what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I set up Blind Vision. The website is blindvision.tv. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, anywhere you can think of, Blind Vision's on it. So Blind Vision was set up to run the Hat Trick Challenge. So we've done the first leg of the challenge. I then went to pool and got my bat boat. Now, to fund a project of this nature, as we all know, it's extremely expensive. So I was thinking to myself, how can I raise some funds? Well, my favourite game is Monopoly. So I thought to myself, what I need to do is get myself off to London and start doing some presentations around the businesses in Mayfair and Park Lane. So that's what I did. I was at this conference doing a lecture one morning about blind vision, about the challenges, about what it was I wanted to achieve and the difference I wanted to create in the lives of visually impaired people. And I went home. Well, this time I've converted my garage with the money that I'd taken from my redundancy from Blind Vision into an office. So I'm sat in my office, the phone rings. This gentleman said, I'd like to speak to Steve Cunningham. I said, well, it's your lucky day, you're speaking to him. He said, oh, my name's Douglas Shanks. He said, I work for a team of accountants in West End of London. He said, I'm thinking to myself, here we go, I've got some sponsorship when they come in, just what I wanted. He said, I'd like to offer you a job. I said, a job? He said, yes. I said, what sort of job is it? He said, I want you to be my sales executive. I said, can I ask you why? He said, because I've never met anybody with more vision, passion, energy and motivation than I've met with you. I think that'd be good for the company. He said, and in turn, it'll give you another income. And off the back of that, we can then raise some funds through all our contacts. So that's what I did. So not only was I running the second leg of this challenge, I was also working for an accountancy practice in London. So in the morning, my day started at 6 o'clock when I left home on a bus into Banbury. I then got a train from Banbury down to Marylebone. I then walked down Baker Street and Wigmore Street to the office. And I was doing that every morning and every night for about 2 years. But after about 6 months, it was just too much. So we worked it out that 2 days I'd work in London and 3 days I'd work from home. So I'd got the foundations for a real good project. So I then went off to Poole to try and find my bat boats. Yet again, all these challenges you can actually see at blindvision.tv. So I managed to source myself a boat. I've got a V8 bat boat, which was the fastest power boat on the sea at that time. The difference between the boat and the car was that in the boat, I'd got a GPS system. I've got electronic vest on, and I've got vibrating pads on the back of both my hands. So if I'm going across the water in a straight line, I've got no vibrations in my hands whatsoever. If I go right to centre, I get a vibration in my left hand. If I go left to centre, I've got a vibration in my right hand. It's a great bit of kit, but it doesn't tell you whether there's a boat or a pier in your way. So I had to have somebody in the boat with me at all times. That project generated over £12.5 million worth of media coverage. And the charities that we supported that year was Guide Dogs for the Blind, Dogs for the Disabled and Blind Children. For me to complete the hat trick of events was going to be a challenge. And if I'm being honest, I never thought I would do. As I spoke when we started Keynote earlier on, it's all about setting your ambitions high, raising that bar, thinking about what it is that you want to do, but more importantly, think about logistically, how can we make this happen? So when we looked at me being the first blind person in history to fly an aeroplane around the UK, and having the CAA back us, it was always going to be a big challenge. But to start with, I had flying lessons 3 or 4 times a week. I had 65 hours of flying lessons, but the big deal breaker for us at Blind Vision was that we had a piece of software flown in from America called a voice activated interface. And what that did was it converted all the information off the control panel into speech. So everything that a sighted pilot would see, I got the same information, but it would be talking to me. So it told me how I were flying, within the climb, in a descent. The difficulty we had was that it wasn't the only piece of software talking to me. I've got my co-pilot talking to me. I've got air traffic control talking to me, and I've got my speech talking to me at the same time. So I've got 3 pieces of information coming in all at once. And the challenge I got was that I had to digest which piece of information it was that I needed to keep me safe and everybody else below me safe at the same time. It was a 5-day project. Day 1 was Biggin Hill to Newcastle. Day 2 was Newcastle to Glasgow. Day 3 was Glasgow to Belfast. Day 4 was Belfast to Cardiff. And day 5 was Cardiff back into London. So I turned up on the 12th of January 2004 to Biggin Hill. I'm sat there in the cockpit, all keyed up, as you can probably appreciate, and we get a call from ABC in Sydney. So I had to get out of the plane, do this interview. So then we lost our slot. So we're about 40 minutes late taking off. And I'm flying up towards Sheffield, and all of a sudden, I needed to go to the toilet. Well, on a little plane like that, it's really not what you want to be experiencing. So we touched down in Sheffield. I jumped out, I went to the loo, and took up again and went to Newcastle. Now, we've got all the media waiting in Newcastle. We were now concerned because I'm an hour late, but we couldn't really explain to them why I'd stopped in Sheffield. We just said there's a real strong headwind, and it took us longer than we thought it was going to take. So day 2 couldn't get any worse than day 1. So we take off from Newcastle to Glasgow. We fly over the mountains in Scotland, and my speech packed in due to turbulence. And that's the reason that I got a backup in my co-pilot sat next to me for that eventuality. Day 3 was an amazing experience. in that we flew from Glasgow to Belfast, and Vince was telling me about all the boats on the water or the landscape. We flew over Troon, the golf course, and it was just an incredible mental feast of pictures that I was being fed. Landed at Newton Arts in Belfast, no problems at all. I went onto the TV 6 o'clock that evening and did a little piece on me, and we were walking through Belfast that evening, and people were just stopping me, shaking my hand, giving me money for guide dogs to the blind. We went into a restaurant and a bar. You know, we didn't get charged anything for our drinks or meal. It was just one of those experiences in your life that you will never forget. I never expected it, you know, because I'm quite a humble chap. For those that know me, you know, I just planned that I want to do something special and different, and I got up and did it. So day 4 was the day from hell, in that we took off from Belfast in the morning. We lost air traffic control going across the Irish Sea. We tried to get through to Swansea, we tried to get through to Cardiff, we tried to get through to London. It was just an absolute nightmare. We were flying in a lot of cloud cover. When we eventually got through, our altitude readings weren't what they should have been. We should have been flying at a minimum of 2,300 feet due to approaching hills, and we're only 1,800 feet. Then we're flying into Cardiff eventually, and we've got a 747 racing up behind us, so we had to let that through, and we landed in fog. So, you know, as Brian was talking a little while ago about climbing mountains, you know, when the strength of the mind and the belief you have to have in your ability and your team at that time to overcome such a challenging aspect of a project, just absolutely immense. So when we landed eventually, you know, it was just such a relief, but something that you train for. This is why you do all this training, both mental training and physical training, to get you through, you know, uncomfortable situations like I was faced with. So day 5, flying back to Cardiff into London, was really straightforward. But Blind Vision as an organisation has developed from being a project management company in managing those sorts of projects into a motivational company, into a training company. And it was never about promoting me. It was always about, we need a vehicle to change perception towards disability. We needed an opportunity to showcase what you can actually do with your life, whether you have a disability or not. I'm living evidence that the impossible is possible. So, you know, that was the mantra, to make a difference in lives of everybody. As I say, Blind Vision has developed into many different areas, in that, you know, I'm now a motivational speaker, so I lecture all over the world. Blind Vision is diverse somewhat into education, so we work in schools and colleges all over the country, motivating and inspiring all levels of ability. You know, we work in big companies all across the world, or we did do before COVID, and things are obviously a little bit different now. But did I ever think that I'd be in this situation that I'm in today? You know, I was incorrectly diagnosed, that we found out 15 years after I went blind. So I shouldn't be a blind person. I'm only in the situation that I'm in due to somebody making a mistake. Now, I can't change that. So I believe that if there's something you can't change, or there's something you can't control, there's no point worrying about it. You should only worry about or make things happen if you have control. You know, there's no point worrying about things that you have no control over whatsoever. I can't control that I went blind, but what I can control is my life. What I can do is say to myself, right, am I happy with what I've got? Was I happy with what I've got? Or am I going to be able to cope with what I've got? And at that point in my life, all answers to that question were no. But I'm a guy that wanted to be successful, wanted to do things. And to do that, I had to take responsibility and ownership moving forward. So once I started working with Villa, once I started getting my feet literally through sprinting, I used all my positive sporting energies and I put them into my life. I put them into my studies. I put them into my ambitions. I put them into dreams, because energy is, if you've got energy, then it's easy to create energy from others. If you've got a negative energy, then people are just going to walk away from you. And we know that, especially at this moment in time, when you look at business. You know, how did I do it? As I said, because I wasn't happy with what I've got and what I was dealt with. You know, why did I do it? Because, you know, I wanted to make that change. You know, if you're not happy with something, you need to do something about it. Now, I wouldn't have the life that I have, you know, with the support of Steve and Blind Vision and Debs and Qantas and everybody else. But I created that network. I created those foundations. I created them because of what's in my head. Because the mind is a very, very powerful tool. The mind is what makes a difference, you know, and you have to take the knocks. And it's easy to celebrate champagne moments. It's not easy to celebrate things when you're on the floor lower than my dog's belly is at the moment. And that's when you find out who you really are and who's really with you. So the knocks for me, they're the tablets that I've rebuilt, you know, my empire upon. With, you know, everything that else that I've created moving forward, you know, that's been a big thing. But there's a phrase that we use at Blind Vision, and it's go mad. Now people think I've gone mad because I fly aeroplanes and I can't see, and I race racing cars and powerboats and I can't see. But it actually means go make a difference. That's what this conference is about. It's about making differences in all our lives, but more importantly, it's about the difference that our network can create in other people's lives. So we've taken responsibility. We're here today because we want to move forward and we want to make differences in people's lives as well as our own lives. So to have that gift, to have that ability, to have those opportunities, you know, we need to start working together collectively and really driving this bus forward, as I always put it. So that's a little bit about the journey that I've been on, which is a very exciting journey, and it continues to get even more exciting. Now we start playing golf, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So if you've got any questions, then the floor
questions coming in
is yours. Right here.
Yeah.
Okay. While people get their thoughts together, Steve, first of all, thank you very much. That's a fantastic story to hear, and congratulations on everything you've achieved. I think, as I said to Richard, if we're booking a motivational speaker, I want to book someone who is actually motivational, because most of them are not. And
Thank you very much.
and with I gave Richard a list of one, and that one was your good self. So yeah, I'm sure everyone who's heard the story this morning will be in awe of your shoes. But if I can take you back to just one part of the journey, when the particular gentleman who didn't take to you, you know, in the bank and was making your life hell,
Yeah.
how did how did you actually react to that? Because you know, I'm assuming it would be easy to, you know, go into yourself and beat yourself up because of the challenges that you've got.
It was to say that when you wake up in the morning and you dread going to work because of what you're going to be faced with and what's going to be intimated at you, it's not a nice thing. But I looked at the bigger picture in that I got an opportunity. This is what I always wanted to do. So I wasn't going to let myself down. I wasn't going to let my team down. And I knew that the branch manager, he was right behind me and he believed in me. So you've just got to think about, what is he saying to you? But more importantly, what is he saying about himself?
Yeah.
So it's not about what I was doing or wasn't doing. It was the place that he was in his own life. And I think in some respects, he found it easier to sort of take his frustrations out on his own limitations than actually looking at the abilities that I got. And I think to a degree, I stood out because of that strength that I have and that vision and focus that I have in turning negative situations, into a positive. I'd just gone and set a world blind land speed record, Dermot, raising millions of pounds on my journey at the same time. That bloke won't fit to hold a candle up to me. There's no way he would have done what I've done in my life. And I'm sure if I was a sighted person, I'd have done a damn sight more than he's ever dreamed of doing in his life. So yes, it is a negative situation, but when you know you're doing your best and you're giving it your all, you can't ask for any more than that. So I know I wasn't letting myself down and I wasn't letting the team down. So it's more about him, yet again, going back to attitude, which we spoke about earlier in the conference.
Yeah.
And that was his boat to float, not mine.
Brilliant. Thank you. Richard, have you got any questions or anyone else, from the floor?
Well, what I would like to say, Steve, is that was absolutely phenomenal. As a lifelong Leicester City fan, I thought the best thing, I thought that the best thing to come out of Aston Villa was Mark Albrighton, but it turns out I'm wrong.
Well, he used to live not far from my parents in town with Mark Albrighton.
Did he? I mean, what's come across for me, well, a couple of things really. First of all, when we were talking about the speakers that we wanted for this event, we wanted, having been to so many events myself and sat in the audience, it's very easy to look at the speakers on stage and go, okay, well, it's all right for you, but I can think of loads of reasons why I can't do what you've done. And so we wanted to put people on stage where they couldn't do that. And I think you've defined that because you've made it clear that you live by life, you live your life by what you can do as opposed to what you can't do. And I think that's a fantastic lesson for everyone to take from that.
Yeah. And it's easy, Richard, to hide behind reasons not to do something. But if you choose to take that path, then that's your decision, nobody else's. But, and I say to people,
No, that's an email. You're still with us.
I said to people, it's up to you. As I say, the destiny is your destiny. Don't blame everybody. Don't blame anybody else because they've gone on and done something with their lives and you haven't when you've had the opportunity. The amount of people I meet who frustrate me because they've got the ability, but they haven't got the energy and the passion and the motivation to do it. And that's got me more frustrated than not having the ability.
Yeah, I think it's and when you've summed up your challenges in just 60 minutes, and again, it's easy to take away from that actually you've got it cracked and that every day goes a dream and all the rest of it. And as I say, I'm sure there are plenty of things that wind you up and frustrate you, but it's having that. It's that ability to get up every day, isn't it? And to deal with. You made the point at the start about it would be wonderful for us all to live in an ideal world and have an ideal life, but we don't, and therefore you just deal with the life that you've got every day, as opposed to sort of moan about the life that you wished you had, but do nothing about it.
Yeah, but that's the frustration of life, isn't it? When you've got, I've got a perceived disability. I can't see, but I've got passion and energy and a focus and a motivation, not because I'm blind, Richard, because we are all different in life. We've all got gifts in life. Let's look at what those gifts are and the difference all our gifts can create moving forward. And that's what the conference is about. It's about looking at that. So if you choose not to do anything about it, then that's your decision and your decision alone. So it's up to you at the end of the day.
Yeah, you made the point about the Queen right at the start of your talk, and she had that moment in her life when she went from essentially a very young woman, princess, just I think just married out there on holiday, to all of a sudden having the responsibilities of an entire country and Commonwealth, foisted on her shoulders, and she could have buckled at that point and gone, well, this isn't fair. I'm not ready for this. But her attitude was, okay, so this is now my life. This is what I do. And I think that we've seen that attitude with all of the challenges that she faced throughout her life. Regardless of people's views on royalty and all the rest of it, you look at individuals like that and go, okay, well, they're made of the same things that we're all made of. It's what you do with it, isn't it?
But it's quite simple, whether you look at it from a negative perspective or a positive perspective. You only get back in life what you put out there. And when you see what she's put out there and the response from the world as to the celebration in her life, and you see the things that I put out there, and I got stopped in town this morning by a nun saying that she follows me on Facebook and I'm an inspiration and all these sorts of things. So it works. You put that positive energy stuff out there, and it follows you around, and it creates even more. And that's what the Queen did across the world. So if we've got an ability or a gift, regardless of how big or small it is, then we should use it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Dermot, would you like me to sum up this morning's events? Would you?
Yes, that would be great. Please do that.
Well, first of all, thank you so much to our two speakers today, to Brian and Steve. They are from the perspective of our attendees and the accountants who are with us today. What we wanted to do was to highlight that for you to be successful in what you do, it's a combination of two things. It's a combination of mindset and of process, and Steve and Brian have perfectly covered that today with how they've spoken together. So thank you to them both. Thank you also to our sponsors for the event today. These are the sponsors who were lined up originally for our face-to-face and have been a fantastic support to us through this. The whole point of Account for Your Future is to take a different approach to running your accounting firms. And so when we looked at both our speakers and our sponsors, we wanted people who fit the bill as well. It's very much about going ahead and doing things as opposed to all the things that maybe we've been told as accountants in the past we should be doing. So we have three key sponsors for us in that process, with Moneypenny, with CPD Store, and with Tax on Demand. And in each case, they are organisations and people who not only get what it's like to be an accountant in practice, but are prepared to support firms through the changes that we need to be making. We know that as a profession, we are transforming. We are looking to work with transformational people, like with Brian and Steve, and with transformational companies like Moneypenny, CPD Store, and Tax on Demand as well. And you'll hear far more about those in the coming events that we do as well. So a huge thank you to them. Tomorrow, I think we're kicking off at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Am I right?
9 o'clock kick-off tomorrow morning. That's correct. Yeah. And
so tomorrow morning, for those that get yourself up bright and early, because 9 o'clock slot is me, so I'll be knocking the cobwebs off you first thing in the morning. We've got Alexandra Bond-Burnett talking with us tomorrow, and we've got Lucy Cohen talking with us tomorrow. So three very, very different perspectives on what it's about in terms of running an accounting firm, and particularly in the case of those two, the stories behind them. So understanding, as Brian was saying, understanding the why and how that interprets into what you do is crucial in any business. And in both their cases, they are fine examples of how that translates into what you can achieve with your businesses. So I hope you can join us tomorrow. Really looking forward to that. And once again, thank you to all of those concerned today, and thank you to you as attendees for coming along. And I'll hand back to you, Dermot.
Yeah, thank you. Well, very professional summary there, Richard. I think you've covered all the key points. Once again, thank you to Steve. Great to hear the story again, and great to work with you. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we can do that a lot sooner than the current break has been. So thanks, Steve, Qantas, and of course the other Steve in the background. to all of the attendees. I hope that you enjoyed the 2 sessions and got a lot out of it. And as Richard says, we are back tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. So with Richard, Lucy and Alex, and it will be another great morning. So look forward to seeing you all again then. The invites will be sent out this afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
All the best.